Wild ricing in Minnesota. Here's a picture of some kernels of wild rice. Wild rice is one of the staples of Native Americans. It's called Zizania palustris is its scientific name. We know it by wild rice. Even though there are several different varieties, it's really hard to tell once the rice is harvested, except maybe by the length. The Jeep is all set to go. The canoe tied on top, the bags, the canoe paddles, the beater sticks, the grain bags, and life jackets are stowed away. You need to have a license to wild rice. Anyone can rice in Minnesota. You just need to get a license and then know where to go. And it's a good idea to look up the 1854 Treaty Authority. It will tell you all the rules and all the supplies and what the restrictions are. Most people cannot race on Indian reservations without special permission. Usually it's just reserved for the residents of that reservation. But there are lots of wild rice lakes that are available to just the general public in Minnesota. We head down the road and travel to our destination. We arrive at the public access. We're the only ones here. The rice lake is open. It's kind of a gloomy day, but that's good because then it's not so hot. We can see the rice beds across the lake. We make sure that our socks are over our pant legs so we don't get bugs inside crawling up our legs. We put on a hat so the bugs don't get in our hair. And especially the person that's doing the rice beating. The paddler isn't so bad, but the person that's getting the rice really gets the brunt of the bugs. We start approaching the rice bed, and you can see the rice. Rice likes to grow in anything from 1 to 3 feet of water. So the water here is fairly shallow. But if it gets to be too deep, the rice isn't that thick. And you'll see later that the closer we get to the lower water, the thicker the rice is. At this time of the year, the rice is standing up. Earlier in the year, the rice lays on top of the water. That's why when there's high water in the middle of the summer, it can be hard on the rice and you might not get much of a harvest. This particular year was a good year, and the rivers and the lakes were just at the right height for water or depth. The rice stands tall, and we start paddling through the rice beds. Normally, we would pole through the bed, but since we took the small canoe, you have to stand up to pole. So here you see Jeff paddling. It's really, really thick, but he tries to keep moving because the better you can move through the rice, the more ground you can cover, and the more ripe rice you can harvest. Here's a picture of a chunk of rice that I just laid in the canoe so that you could see how the grains are. It looks a little bit like wheat, the way they are attached to the stems, but they're long and skinny and they have little hairs on them. In this picture you might be able to see that I have on a hat and I have my socks that are over my pant legs. Some people put duct tape around because the bugs are really, really terrible. There's millions of little bugs in the rice. Once you start to dry it, the bugs all flee, or you can pick them out. But if you can see in this picture, you can see my socks are full of bugs and then chunks of wild rice stuck to it. The wild rice just is so thick that it kind of just hangs over the edge of the boat. And that's how we are able to get it. We want to be very careful that we don't hit it too hard, though, and damage what we have going on. We don't want to damage any of the stems because we want it to grow again later on. Here I'm beating the rice. You kind of hit with the rice and then scoop it at the same time. You don't want to break the stems off. We shared the rice paddies with the ducks and with birds of all sorts. And so we want to make sure that we don't take it all. But sometimes we will get a few stems in there. The sticks are shaped a little bit like short pool cues, but they do have a weight limit. They have to be under a pound. Ours only weigh a few ounces. It's made out of pine. Here's the beginning of the rice laying in the bottom of the boat. I don't know if you can notice this, but there's like little hairs sticking up. And once the rice is in the boat, they all seem to gather and they end up all pointing in the same direction. This is kind of nature's way of the rice knowing if it falls off, how to reseed itself. Once we get to the landing, the boat starts filling up and filling up with rice. Once we're at the landing, we have to load all of that rice into bags. We scoop it up, and bugs and all, and we take it home and spread it out on a tarp with fans on it, and we rake it every few hours, and we pick out any bugs and sticks and things don't belong in it so that it's fairly clean. Once it's dried, and you'll see here we have to lay it fairly thin. You can't have it too thick or it won't dry. Once it's dried, we send it off to a processing plant where they heat it over very high dry heat and cook it without scorching it. And then they break the hulls and winnow the hulls off. And finally, this rice only needs to be cooked for about 10 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes. And it is nutritious and delicious. And we can hardly wait to go wild racing again next year.